It was a Thursday, cold, gray, and forgettable in every way except for what was said. I remember the clink of silverware on ceramic, the way she stirred her water with the straw, not looking at me when she spoke. I had just said, "This isn't fair anymore," a sentence I didn't rehearse, but had carried inside me like a stone for months. And she, without hesitation, without even a flicker of hesitation, replied, "Don't blame my brother for your failures." She didn't look at me. That's what stayed with me the most. Not her words, cruel as they were, but the absence of hesitation, the ease with which she said them, like she'd rehearsed them, like she'd been waiting. For years, I kept my mouth shut. I built Leo's company brick by brick, financial models, operational workflows, back-end systems, all mine. But Leo had the face, the charisma, the confidence of a man who knew nothing and admitted even less. I didn't mind. At first, one married his sister. I thought we were family. I thought that meant something, but over time, credit stopped trickling down. Bonuses were delayed, then restructured. Board meetings started happening without me. At first I thought it was an oversight, then a pattern, then a message. And still, I kept going. I told myself I was doing it for Rachel, for our kids, for our future. She always said her brother was just a little clumsy with gratitude. I believed her. That lunch changed everything. It wasn't a fight. Fights require resistance. What happened was more like a quiet signing of a contract I didn't know existed. Her words drew a line, and I realized I had been standing alone on my side of it for a long time. I just hadn't looked down before. When I got back to my office, my glass box in the corner with no blinds and no lock, I looked at the whiteboard I had filled with flowcharts and projections, then sat down and opened a folder labeled Q for expansion. The numbers were clean. The model was airtight, but Leo had already pitched it to the board 2 days earlier, presenting it as his. A junior analyst had leaked me the deck accidentally, he said. That night, I lay awake next to Rachel. I didn't touch her. I didn't ask her why, she said. What she said, I didn't need to. I already knew. She chose comfort. She chose legacy. She chose the man with the louder voice, even if it was empty. And I chose silence. But silence is not the same as surrender. In the days that followed, I started pulling threads. Old emails, deleted files, Redland contracts. I kept my head down, nodded through meetings, answered questions like I always did, direct, unimposing, but in the background, I was building a map. A map of every lie, every false signature, every shell company that moved money where it shouldn't have gone. Leo was sloppy, and worse, arrogant. He never thought I'd check. He never thought I'd need to. And Rachel, she grew distant, or maybe I just saw her clearly for the first time. The way she nodded too quickly when Leo spoke, the way she always knew what the board had decided before I did, the way she stopped asking how my day was. It wasn't betrayal. Not to her, it was loyalty. But not to me. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not yet. I wasn't ready to move. Not until I knew the full scope. I needed more than proof. I needed leverage, because this wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclamation. It didn't start with betrayal. It started with blurred lines. A favor here, a signature there. Just to speed things up, Leo would say, "You're better." With the details anyway, I was, and I took pride in that. While he schmoozed investors and flashed his manufactured charm, I constructed the foundation. He sold the vision. I built the engine. But somewhere along the way, the credit I never asked for turned into silence I could no longer ignore. I went back through every folder I had access, tuckline acquisition ledgers, payroll accounts, vendor, contracts. Nothing illegal jumped out at first glance, but it wasn't the numbers that gave Leo away, it was the names, repeated names. A vendor called Millstone Partners, charging us double market rate. A consulting firm, Polaris, advised us monthly despite never showing up in a single meeting. And on every contract, Leo's signature. Not countersigned, not reviewed, just authorized. But at first, I assumed negligence. Then I found the wire transfers. Millstone Partners funneled money to a Cayman holding company. That holding company had a director. The name meant nothing to most. But I remembered him. Darrell Sand, Leo's old roommate from undergrad, the one who was expelled for manipulating student grants. He'd vanished after that. Apparently, not for long. Polaris Advisory had a different face. It was Rachel's. She was listed as a silent partner. That was the moment something shifted in me. Not rage, not sorrow. Something colder, structural. Like the last girder in a collapsing bridge, finally giving out. For months, I had suspected distance between us. Now I saw it wasn't distance. It was divergence. She wasn't indifferent. She was involved. I didn't confront her. What would be the point? Truth, in her eyes, was shaped by loyalty. And her loyalty had drifted, not suddenly, but gradually, like a tide pulling her away from the man I used to be. That night, I drove past our house. I didn't go in. Instead, I parked 3 blocks away, sat in the dark, and scrolled through pictures. On my phone, photos from early vacations, our wedding, the launch party for the company. Leo with his arm around me, Rachel beside him, all of us smiling like the world made sense. But smiles lie. They don't fade when trust fades. They stay frozen in digital amber while everything else decays. I needed allies. Quiet ones. I reached out to Jasper, our former compliance officer. He left 2 years ago, under vague circumstances that always bothered me. He answered on the first ring. "You finally seeing it?" he asked. No greeting, no pretense. "I need information," I said, "and I need silence." He gave me both. In a Dropbox folder marked old stuff, I found documents I never knew existed, internal memos, flagged invoices, and one email that sealed it all. A message from Leo to the CFO, instructing her to bury a deficit in R&D expenditures. Dated the week before our last investment round. That was fraud. Clean, undeniable, federal-level fraud. Now, I had a new problem. This wasn't just about ethics anymore. This was criminal, and I was complicit, at least on paper. If the company went down, I would go with it. Unless I could prove I'd been deliberately excluded from the financial trail. That meant showing a pattern, decisions made without my consent, omissions in reporting, direct efforts to deceive me. I started documenting, backing up my own emails, exporting Slack threads, creating a timeline. I couldn't go to the board. Not yet. Too many of them were Leo's drinking buddies or Rachel's friends. I needed to move like they did, indirectly, through leverage and angles. I thought of the lunch again, of her words. "Don't blame my brother for your failures." She said them like a mantra, not a defense. Like she'd rehearsed it, not just for me, but for herself. But if I had failed at anything, it was assuming that loyalty meant permanence. That blood ties and marriage vows had weighed against ambition. I was wrong. They didn't. What they did give me, though, was proximity. And proximity was power. They had built a fortress. I had lived inside it. I knew the locks. I knew the patterns. Now I just needed the right moment to burn it down from within. The first clue wasn't in the financials. It was in the code. 2 years ago, we launched a proprietary analytics platform. Our crown jewel, Leo liked to call it. I had spearheaded its design, built the architecture from scratch, and managed the dev team. But after the beta release, Leo insisted we streamline operations. That meant outsourcing maintenance to a third-party firm he'd vetted personally. At the time, I didn't push back. I should have, because when I opened the back-end logs hidden behind 2 layers of admin credentials I hadn't touched in months, I saw something that didn't belong. Ghost users. Accounts that didn't exist in our employee directory. Logging in at irregular hours, accessing proprietary client data. It wasn't just data theft. It was manipulation. One of the ghost users had edited performance reports for 3 of our top-paying clients, making our metrics look stronger than they were. And those inflated reports were the foundation of our last investor pitch. The same one that secured us a $42 million funding round 6 months ago. If discovered, it wouldn't just be fraud. It would be wire fraud, data tampering, breach of contract, felonies. And I had built the platform it happened on. The trap was almost elegant. If it collapsed, Leo would blame the system. The system was mine. His hands clean. Rachel's invisible. But I wasn't just the architect. I was the locksmith. I traced the IPs to resolve to a WeWork in downtown. The third came from Leo's home address. I didn't confront him. I created a decoy breach, subtle, believable, just enough noise to justify a third-party security audit. I used Jasper's contact, a cybersecurity firm based out of Boston, discreet and expensive. I told them nothing. I simply gave them access and let them find what I already knew was there. In parallel, I contacted Mar, our former lead developer. She left after a quiet fallout with Leo over strategic differences. What I didn't know was that Leo had pushed her out because she questioned the ghost access months ago. He called it a legacy glitch. She didn't believe him. When I told her what I'd found, she didn't hesitate. "Send me the server snapshots," she said. "I'll build a forensic trail. Just promise me one thing, don't let him bury it this time." I promised. Over the next week, I played the role I'd mastered: quiet, dependable, invisible. I presented at meetings, nodded through updates, even laughed at Leo's jokes, all while watching the audit unfold from the inside. They found the ghost accounts. They flagged the tampered data. They requested a formal meeting with leadership. Leo tried to spin it. Of course. Early testing, environment contamination, he said, legacy dev tools leaking into production. But Mara's report, sourced and timestamped, left no room for ambiguity. The data manipulation wasn't accidental. It was engineered by someone with top-level access. He blamed a rogue contractor, offered to fire the scapegoat immediately, claimed ignorance. That's when I spoke up for the first time in months. "I'll handle the internal review," I said. His eyes twitched. Just a fraction, but it was the first crack. I knew then he was scared, not because of what I found, but because he didn't know what else I had. Rachel texted me that night. Not a call, just a message. "Why are you doing this?" I didn't reply. She didn't deserve my answer. Because the truth was simple. I wasn't doing this to destroy Leo. I was doing it to survive him. The ghosts in the code weren't just technical. They were the ghosts of my silence. the ones I had allowed to multiply. Through years of passive trust, every overlooked invoice, every unchallenged decision, every lunch where I swallowed discomfort like a side dish. But now they had names, and timestamps and patterns. Soon, they would have consequences. That began, as most things do in business, with an email, not to the board, not to investors, to one man, Felix Roman, senior investigator at the Office of Corporate Oversight and Compliance. His reputation was simple, incorruptible. He didn't return favors, he didn't do lunch, and he didn't forget names. I'd met him once, years ago, during a regulatory panel. I kept his card, not because I thought I'd need him but because I recognized, in his quiet, deliberate questions, a mind built like mine, measured, patient, unafraid of silence. I didn't send him a bombshell. I sent BREAD, CRUMBS. A timeline, redacted reports, server logs, a request to meet off record. He responded in 42 minutes. While Felix reviewed, I kept building. The architecture of Leo's empire was layered with illusion, shelf companies posing as vendors, inflated valuations built on manipulated metrics, equity grants disguised as consulting fees. It wasn't one crime. It was a systemic cathedral, a fraud where every beam was bolted to the next. Rachel was part of the scaffolding. I didn't want her to be, but the emails I recovered said otherwise. She forwarded investor updates to Leo before they were finalized. She lobbied board members to grant Leo more voting power, and in one chilling exchange, she approved a contract payout to Polaris Advisory, the firm that secretly fed money back to Leo's holding entity. At night, I studied her the way one studies a collapsing building, watching for shifts in tone, flickers of doubt, but she was steady, smiling, asking about the kids, about dinner, about nothing that mattered. Her normalcy wasn't comforting. It was calculated. She knew something was coming. She just didn't know what shape it would take. Felix met me in a parking structure 2 towns over. He said nothing for the first 5 minutes, just flipped through printouts with a red pen, circling, initialing, shaking his head slightly. You realize, he said finally, that if even half of this is true, it won't just be him going down. I nodded. I'm aware. You're exposed. I've been exposed for years. I said, this is me closing the window. He asked for everything, full documents, unredacted emails, access logs. I gave it to him. He asked if I wanted protection. I said no. Protection implies fear. I wasn't afraid. I was prepared. That same week, I initiated a full audit under the guise of a platform security overhaul. It gave me legal authority to access any system connected to company infrastructure. That included Leo's personal work email, his calendar, even his external drives. I found backups of internal communications, investor pitch decks with fake growth projections, NDAs forced onto whistleblowers. I didn't confront him. I let him speak. He called an all-hands meeting, talked about evolving challenges and navigating uncertainty. The usual word, salad. I stood at the back, silent, unnoticed. But when he asked for questions, I raised my hand. Should we inform the board about the security breaches in the Polaris data cluster? I asked, knowing full well no one else in that room had access to the Polaris cluster, except him. His face didn't change, but his hand tightened around the mic. Subtle, but I saw it. The walls were beginning to close in. I knew what came next. He'd tried to shift blame, discredit the audit, create a distraction. So I made my move first. I requested a one-on-one with the board chair. I showed her the evidence. I showed her the backup drive. I didn't accuse Leo. I didn't need to. Simply asked her one question. If the SEC shows up tomorrow, whose name will be on the front page? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Rachel noticed the shift. She stopped asking about work, started staying out later, smiled less. I wondered if she saw the structure cracking beneath her, or if she still believed Leo could talk his way out of it. He couldn't, not this time. The architecture was sound until it WASN single quotes, TO, and when it finally fell, it would not collapse in chaos. It would fall like it was designed to, by the same hands that built it. The email from the board chair came at 7:13 a.m., emergency executive session, la once alto m. All principal officers required. No proxies, no explanation, none needed. I knew what was coming. So did Leo. At 10:59. He walked into the conference room with the swagger of a man still clinging to illusion. He wore the same navy blazer he always used for investor calls, the one that made him look like the idea of a CEO. Rachel was already seated, next to the general counsel. She didn't look at me. That silence was its own kind of verdict. The chair began with a prepared statement. Polite, vague, corporate. Then she turned to me. Please present your findings. I didn't dramatize. I didn't embellish. I laid out the timeline. The vendor fraud, the manipulated metrics, the unauthorized data access, the falsified financials tied to investor reports. Then I handed out copies of the independent audit, the forensic server analysis, and the full email trail. Leo laughed once aloud. Too sharp. This is ridiculous, he said. You think you're going to drag me through the mud because of a few discrepancies? You've always hated that I made this company public. He looked around the table, waiting for someone to nod, to laugh with him, to side with him. No one did. The chair cleared her throat. We've also received a formal inquiry from the OCC. You've been named in a preliminary investigation. His face didn't crack. It imploded, not visibly, internally, the way someone recalculates 100 variables in real time and realizes the equation always ends the same. Ruin. I didn't smile. There was nothing satisfying about the moment. Not yet. He turned to Rachel. You knew about this. She still didn't look at me. Only him. I didn't think he'd follow through. She said. 6 words. Enough to bury what was left. The board voted. Effective immediately, Leo was suspended pending full investigation. His access revoked. His equity frozen. An interim CEO was appointed. I declined. I'm not here to lead, I said. I'm here to clean. After the meeting, he confronted me in the parking lot. No security, no audience. Just 2 men surrounded by concrete and betrayal. Think they'll protect you, he said. You think they'll thank you for this? No, I replied. But I'll sleep. He laughed again, hollow this time. You were nothing without me. A cog, a ghost. You still are. I was a ghost, I said. Now I'm the author of your obituary. He left in silence. No final swing. No apology. Just a shadow shrinking. In the rear view of his own story. Rachel didn't come home that night. Or the next. On the 3rd day, I found her suitcases gone. A note on the kitchen counter. I never thought you'd choose war. She was wrong. I chose clarity. She just never imagined a version of me that didn't orbit her brother's gravity. In the weeks that followed, subpoenas were issued. The press caught wind. Headlines shifted from celebration to scandal. Tech visionary under investigation. Leo Kincaid's fall from grace. My name was buried in the middle paragraphs exactly where I wanted it. I met Felix again. He thanked me for the organization of the files. This'll move faster than usual, he said, because you didn't just blow a whistle. You built a case. I asked him one question. Do they ever come back from this? He shrugged. Some rebrand, some disappear. The smart ones vanish before the ink dries. I nodded. He won't vanish. He needs an audience. Then he'll self-destruct eventually. And Rachel, I didn't chase her. I didn't call. We had loved each other once, in the way young people do, without contingency, without foresight. But love without truth is just proximity. And we had run out of both. That the company survived. Barely. Investors demanded blood. The board gave them. Leo's and I returned to silence, but not the silence of a man defeated. The silence of a man who finally stopped building for others. In the weeks that followed, the world moved quickly. The SEC issued formal charges against Leo: wire fraud, securities fraud, conspiracy. He posted bail the same day, of course, still wearing his signature smile in the photographs, still pretending it was all a misunderstanding. He gave a statement on the courthouse steps, flanked by 2 lawyers and a PR handler. I built something from nothing, he said. Of course, there were mistakes. He didn't mention my name. He didn't have to. I was the shadow behind the scandal. The man who broke the illusion. To him, that made me the traitor. But the people closest to the company knew. Vendors, mid-level managers, engineers who had been shut out of promotions, compliance officers who had seen red flags but were told to look away. One by one, they reached out, not to thank me, but to confess what they'd buried. And that's when the weight hit me, not guilt. Exactly, but the sheer scale of what I'd allowed to grow. My silence hadn't just protected Leo, it had enabled him. Every time I signed off on a project without verifying its structure. Every time I let a bonus go unpaid. Every time I let Rachel reassure me with a half smile and a redirected kiss, I had helped build the myth that he was untouchable. I didn't go back to the office. I stayed home, cleaned the garage, cooked my own meals. I read books I had shelved years ago, ones on ethics, on systems theory, on collapse, not fiction. I couldn't stomach fiction yet. Rachel emailed me once, a brief note: I'm in Chicago, with friends, no lawyers yet. I don't want to fight. I didn't respond. Some losses don't need negotiation. They just need distance. People asked me if I would sue. For damages, lost shares, breach of trust. The legal team offered to back me if I wanted to file civil claims against both Leo and the company. I declined. Not because I forgave, but because I had already taken what mattered. Truth. Exposure. The ability to walk into a room and not be someone else's secret. Leo's trial was set for the following spring. His legal team delayed it once. Twice. By the 3rd motion, the judge issued a warning. The prosecution had more than enough. The auditor's findings were airtight. Mara's forensic trail had withstood scrutiny from 2 separate cybersecurity firms. In my deposition, every word was deliberate, not dramatic. Just irrefutable. I kept my personal life out of the public conversation. No press interviews, no memoir, no podcasts. I didn't want to be another footnote in a cycle of scandal turned spectacle. I'd seen what that did to people. Instead, I began consulting, quietly with companies on the verge of their own collapses. I didn't advertise. I didn't build a website. Word spread, a man who knew how to dismantle systems from the inside. Some called me a whistleblower. Others called me dangerous. I didn't correct either camp. Late one evening, Jasper visited. We sat on the back porch. No drinks. Just quiet. You know, he said, most people who do what you did end up bitter. Or erased. I'm neither, I replied. He nodded. But you're not free either. No, I said, not yet. Because that was the truth. Justice wasn't a cure. It was a reckoning. It didn't restore what was lost. It just leveled the ground so something new could grow. And that takes time. The aftershocks were still coming. Investors litigated. Employees sought new jobs. Trust, once cracked, spread like a fault line through the entire sector. But me, I had stopped being a ghost. Now I was a mirror. And mirrors don't lie. They just wait for you to look. The trial began in spring. By then, the world had moved on to newer scandals. Younger faces. But in that courtroom, time slowed. Leo arrived, flanked by attorneys. Thinner than before. More polished. Less certain. He didn't look at me. Not during my testimony. Not during cross-examination, not even when the prosecution presented the evidence I had curated for months' emails, audit trails, the forensic analysis Mara had delivered like an autopsy. He looked past me, or maybe through me. That was his way. If he couldn't control you, he erased you. The verdict wasn't immediate. Corporate cases rarely are. But the prosecution made their case methodically, like I had built mine. Brick by brick. Lie by lie. They didn't need character witnesses. They had the architecture. When the jury returned, they didn't look at him either. Only the judge, guilty, on 5 counts. Sentencing postponed. Pending appeal. I didn't celebrate. I didn't stay. I walked out of the courtroom without waiting for the cameras to finish clicking. My part was done. Back home, spring had bled into early summer. The trees outside my window bloomed. In that quiet, relentless way nature has indifferent to trials, scandals, or the reconstruction of men. Rachel hadn't contacted me again. No letters, no final apologies. Her absence had become a kind of presence, one that didn't ache. Just existed. I heard from her mother once, a short call. She asked how I was. I said I was learning to live differently. She didn't ask for details. I think she knew. Sometimes people don't want explanations. They want peace, even if they don't deserve it. The company restructured. They tried to rebrand. Of course, new logo, new leadership, new language about integrity and oversight. I watched from a distance. Not with bitterness, just clarity. It would survive. Maybe even thrive again. But it would never be what it was. And that was a kind of justice too. Jasper offered to take me on as a partner in a new venture. Ethics and compliance consulting. Real teeth, real reform. I said, maybe. I wasn't done being quiet yet. Instead, I started writing. Not for publication. Just to see what my voice sounded like when it wasn't echoing someone else's narrative. I wrote about silence. About complicity. About the strange, slow process of watching something you love rot from the inside, and deciding not to run. I wrote about Rachel, about the moment I first knew she would never choose me over her brother, and the moment I finally stopped asking her to. I wrote about Leo, the boy he was, the man he became, the machine he built around himself. And the irony that it was never the lie that destroyed him but the belief that no one would ever question it. And then I wrote about myself. Not as a hero, not even as a victim, just a man who waited too long, then moved with precision. I wrote to remember, to warn, to forgive, in the most strategic sense of the word. Because forgiveness, when it is chosen, not demanded, not begged, is not weakness. It is architecture, a structure stronger than vengeance, quieter than justice, but no less deliberate. People asked me, later, what I learned. I told them this: trust is not a gift. It's a contract. Break it, and the pieces don't fit the same when you try to put them back. Some fractures echo forever. Some silences become verdicts. And sometimes, the man you thought was lost inside the walls he helped build walks out, not ruined, not triumphant, but whole. At last.